The kingdom of Nethera slept under a veil of twilight, where the sun never fully rose, and the moon lingered like a pale guardian. Its people whispered that the land was blessed and cursed in the same breath, for the royal bloodline was tied to an ancient magic, the power of the moon, the light of prophecy, and the shadows of forgotten kings. High atop the cliffs of Eldermoon, the palace rose like a frozen dream, its towers catching the dim glow of the eternal dusk. Celine moved quietly through the halls, her steps soundless against the cold marble floors. She was the younger of two sisters, her hair dark as midnight, her eyes the color of storm clouds. She served the royal family faithfully, unnoticed, unseen. Yet within her heart, she carried a secret as dangerous as it was miraculous. She bore the heir of the kingdom, a child destined to shape Nethera's fate. Not a soul knew, not even the king himself. Her sister, Leora, walked ahead, radiant in her ceremonial gown, the silver embroidery catching the faint moonlight. She was chosen tonight, the night of the Luna ceremony, to be bound as Alaric's mate. The palace buzzed with anticipation, noble guests whispering of her beauty, her destiny, and the power she would wield as Luna. Celine's chest tightened as she followed, every heartbeat echoing with longing and sorrow. King Alaric waited in the great hall, his presence commanding even in the dim light. His dark eyes swept the room, piercing and calculating. There was a weight to him, an unspoken sorrow that the court never acknowledged. When his gaze fell upon Leora, it softened at least, outwardly, but it flickered toward Celine for the briefest instant, a spark of recognition he quickly suppressed. No one saw it but her. The ceremonial drums began, echoing through the hall, vibrating like the pulse of the world itself. Leora approached the throne, her steps confident, her smile practiced. Alaric rose, his hand extended, and the court fell silent. Leora of House Vael, the high priest intoned, his voice like rolling stone. Do you accept the bond of Luna with King Alaric, to share his strength, his power, and his destiny under the light of the moon? Leora's voice rang clear. I do. Celine watched, her fingers curling at her sides. She had loved Alaric in silence, had felt his fleeting glances, his unspoken understanding, and even a moment of warmth when their hands had brushed in the palace gardens long ago. But she had stepped back, knowing her place, knowing the laws of the bloodline, knowing that Leora was destined to wear the crown beside him. And yet, the child within her stirred, reminding her that fate could bend in ways no one expected. The priest continued, Then may the moon witness your bond, and may your hearts remain intertwined as the stars witness your journey. A hush fell over the hall as Alaric took Leora's hand. Celine felt a pang deep in her chest. She had almost spoken once, almost revealed her secret, but had been silenced by fear and duty. The child inside her moved, and she pressed a hand to her belly instinctively, feeling warmth and power that no mortal could contain. This was the secret the court did not know. The future of Nethera rested in her womb, unseen and unclaimed. After the ceremony, the court celebrated with music, whispers, and glittering lights. Celine moved among them like a shadow, her heart heavy. She glimpsed Alaric across the hall. He was speaking with Leora, smiling, nodding. But every so often, his gaze faltered. His eyes drifted, almost involuntarily, toward her. She looked away, telling herself it was dangerous to hope, to feel, to imagine a bond that could never be acknowledged. Later, when the hall had emptied and the guests had retired, Celine returned to the quiet of the northern gardens. The moon hung low, almost touching the horizon, its silver light brushing the petals of the night-blooming flowers. Here, in the stillness, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel, to think. A whisper of wind stirred her hair. Celine, a voice murmured behind her. She turned sharply, her heart leaping. It was Alaric, standing in the shadows, his expression unreadable. You should not be here. she said softly, though her voice betrayed the tremor of longing she could not hide. I could say the same, he replied. His eyes, dark and searching, found hers. The ceremony. I don't understand why my heart, it falters. Celine swallowed. Her secret, her child, the destiny she carried, it all pressed against her chest like a stone. The heart falters for many reasons, Your Majesty. Sometimes it cannot choose what is proper or expected. Alaric took a step closer. You feel it too, don't you? Something beyond duty? Beyond prophecy? Celine's breath caught. She wanted to reach for him, to reveal the truth, but the world was not ready. The kingdom, the sisters, the prophecy, all of it would crumble if anyone knew what she carried. I cannot. Not yet, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. He nodded, though his eyes glimmered with regret and longing. Very well. But know this, Celine, I cannot forget. She turned away, hiding her tears, and walked deeper into the garden. Her mind raced, thinking of the visions that had haunted her dreams for weeks, a child bathed in silver light, whispering of destiny and danger, warning her that the kingdom's survival depended on the one no one yet knew existed. That night, as Celine lay in her small chamber, the moonlight spilling across the floor, she felt the child stir again. The tiny movements were like whispers of power, a promise and a warning. She pressed a hand to her belly, speaking softly. You will be the hope of Nythera, she murmured. And one day, they will know your worth. One day, they will understand. Outside, the palace slept, but shadows moved. The walls whispered secrets. The corridors hummed with ancient magic, and in the distance, a howl broke the silence, a reminder that darkness always watched. Waiting, Celine knew that her path would not be easy, that danger surrounded the secret she carried, and that love and betrayal would entwine in ways she could scarcely imagine. Tomorrow, she would see Leora, radiant and crowned as Luna. Tomorrow, Alaric would return to the throne, bound by duty and yet haunted by unspoken desire. And tomorrow, the prophecy would begin to stir. Selene closed her eyes, listening to the heartbeat of the child within her. In the quiet, she felt the weight of the future, the heavy pull of destiny, and the painful thrill of longing. She was bound to shadows and light alike, to love she could not claim, to power she could not yet wield. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew this night was only the beginning, for the child she carried was no ordinary heir. It was the hope of a kingdom, the spark that could save them all, or doom them, if its secret were discovered. And in the moonlit garden, Celine made a silent vow. She would protect the child, protect the kingdom, and endure the heartache, even if it meant watching the man she loved choose her sister as Luna. Because destiny, she knew, was rarely gentle. The kingdom of Nythera had woken to a new dawn. Though the sky remained a dim gray, the light of the sun struggling through clouds heavy with shadow. The palace, once quiet, now buzzed with activity. Servants moved like ghosts, arranging flowers, polishing silver, and preparing the chambers for Leora, the newly crowned Luna. The court whispered endlessly about her grace, her beauty, and the power she would bring to King Alaric. Celine walked through the halls, her steps quiet as always. She had risen before dawn, as was her habit, to tend to the gardens where the moonlight lingered longest. Her thoughts were consumed by the child she carried, the heir whose presence no one yet knew. Every heartbeat of the child pulsed like a warning, a promise, a thread of magic too strong to ignore. The air in the palace seemed heavier than usual, filled with unspoken tension. Selene could feel it, the shifting of power, the unseen eyes watching her every move. Leora's new position as Luna cast a long shadow, one that reached even into Celine's quiet corners. Yet Celine also sensed a different shadow. Alaric's lingering gaze, fleeting though it was, drawn to her in moments he could not control. The king moved through the court with his usual measured grace, yet Selene noticed the subtle changes. His eyes, though directed at Leora, occasionally flickered toward her, softening in a way that made her heart ache. She had loved him silently for so long, and though she had resigned herself to the impossible, every glance reminded her of what might have been. In the palace gardens, the air was cool, and the moonlight touched every leaf and petal with silver. Selene knelt beside a patch of night-blooming flowers, their petals trembling as if aware of the magic surrounding her. She whispered softly, feeling the child stir. "You are strong," she murmured, pressing a hand to her belly. "Stronger than they know. And one day, you will be the reason this kingdom survives." The child's small movements answered her, almost as if understanding her words. A flicker of moonlight shimmered above her hand, and Selene felt a warmth unlike anything she had known. It was a gentle pulse of magic, subtle but unmistakable. She knew the child's power would grow, but she also knew that it made them a target. A soft rustle of fabric made her turn. Alaric stepped into the moonlight, his expression unreadable. "You should not wander alone," he said, his voice low, carrying both authority and concern. "I could say the same to you," Selene replied, though her voice was softer than she intended. He stepped closer, the silver light casting shadows across his sharp features. "There is something about you," he said, almost to himself. "Something I cannot understand, yet cannot ignore." Selene's heart thudded. The child within her shifted, sensing the tension, and she placed a hand over her belly instinctively. "Perhaps some things are meant to be mysteries," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Even for a king." Alaric studied her, the faintest flicker of emotion passing through his dark eyes. "Mysteries are dangerous," he said finally. "And yet, I find I am drawn to them, no matter the risk." Selene felt a pang of longing she could not deny, but she quickly turned away. "You must not let yourself be drawn," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. "The court, the kingdom, it has rules that even kings must follow." He nodded slowly, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. "Rules," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Sometimes rules are not enough." As he turned and walked away, Selene felt a cold shiver. His words lingered, heavy and unresolved, like a storm waiting to break. She pressed her hand to her belly again, feeling the child's quiet magic. The prophecy she had glimpsed in dreams was awakening. Danger and hope intertwined, and she knew that the next days would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. The following evening, Selene walked the palace corridors under the pale light of the moon. Leora passed her, radiant and confident, her presence a constant reminder of what Selene had lost, or what she believed she had lost. Yet, in the shadows, Selene felt power stirring within her, a quiet determination. She was not merely a sister or a servant, she was the bearer of the kingdom's hope. In the chambers of the royal library, Selene found herself drawn to the ancient tomes of prophecy. The moonlight fell across the open pages, illuminating words written centuries before. "The hidden air shall bear the light of the moon, and their presence shall heal what is broken. Yet their path is shadowed, and only the bond of love and courage can guide them." She traced the letters with her finger, her heart pounding. The prophecy spoke of her child. She was the hidden vessel, the one carrying the spark of salvation. Yet it also spoke of danger, betrayal, and the trials that awaited them. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Selene?" She turned to see Alaric standing in the doorway, his expression careful, wary. "You should not be here alone," he said again. But there was no accusation in his tone. "I am not afraid of the shadows," Selene replied quietly. "I have faced darker than this in my dreams." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "And yet, you carry something I cannot see, something powerful." Selene looked away, her secret burning like fire in her chest. "Some things are not meant for kings to know," she whispered. Alaric's gaze softened, a mixture of sorrow and longing in his eyes. "I am not like other men," he said quietly. "I feel, I sense, even when I should not. There is a bond, invisible, yet undeniable, between us." Um, Celine's heart ached. She longed to reach for him, to speak the truth, to reveal the child. But she could not. Not yet. The prophecy, the court, the kingdom, everything depended on secrecy. "Then you must trust what you cannot see," she said softly. He nodded, though his lips pressed into a hard line. "I will try," he said. And for a moment, the distance between them felt smaller, almost bridged by the moonlight. Outside, the wind carried whispers through the palace gardens, brushing against leaves and flowers, stirring the night with secrets. Celine felt the child shift again, a tiny surge of energy that made the hairs on her arms rise. She knew the magic was awakening, preparing them both for what was to come. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. Leora, now Luna, took her place beside Alaric, dazzling the court with her poise and charm. Celine moved like a shadow behind them, careful not to reveal her secret. But every moment with Alaric was a test of will. Each stolen glance and word heavy with longing. The child's magic pulsed in response, subtle signs that the prophecy was stirring. One night, Celine stood on the balcony of her chambers, gazing at the moon high above the palace. The child moved again, almost insistently, and she whispered softly, "Soon they will know. Soon the kingdom will understand. And I will protect you, no matter what comes." A distant howl echoed through the valley, sharp and mournful, a reminder that darkness never slept. Selene's hand tightened on the balcony railing. She knew that danger was approaching, that the prophecy would not wait, and that the choices of the heart would be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. For now, she was a shadow in the moonlight, a hidden guardian of the kingdom's hope. But the threads of fate were pulling tighter, drawing her, her child, and Alaric toward a destiny none of them could deny. And somewhere in the silent night, the first signs of the storm began to stir. The palace of Nythera had grown colder in recent days. The sun, if it could be called that, barely touched the horizon, and the twilight stretched long into the hours when the court should have rested. Celine felt it in her bones, the tension that seemed to cling to the walls, the whispers of noble families, the silent judgments that pressed against her like unseen chains. She moved through the corridors with careful grace, aware of every shadow, every flicker of light. Leora, now fully adorned as Luna, moved with a confidence that made the court bow to her. She was radiant, commanding, and every eye followed her. Celine's heart ached each time she watched her sister smile at Alaric, the king who had once looked at her with something more than duty. Yet the child within her stirred with a quiet strength, a reminder that destiny was her secret ally, even when the world seemed against her. Alaric had been more distant in the past days, yet Celine sensed a subtle change. Every brush of his hand against hers, every shared glance in passing, was heavy with unspoken emotion. The tension between them grew like a storm hidden in clouds, threatening to break. One evening, as the moon rose high and pale over the palace, Celine wandered into the northern gardens. The air was still, the flowers glowing faintly in the moonlight. Here, she could breathe, could think, could feel the child move within her. "You will be safe," she whispered, pressing a hand over her belly. "I will not let anything harm you. Not here, not ever." A rustle of leaves made her spin. Alaric stepped out from the shadows, his expression wary yet open. "Selene," he said softly, "you should not wander alone. There are things in the night that do not sleep." "I know," she replied, her voice calm, though her pulse raced. "I am not afraid of shadows. I have faced them before. He studied her, his gaze lingering on her face as if trying to read the thoughts she hid so well. And yet, I see fear in you. Not for yourself, but for something you carry. Celine's heart skipped. The child was the secret no one could know. Some burdens are ours to bear alone, she said quietly. Alaric nodded, but his expression softened. I wish I could help, he said. I wish I could protect you in ways I cannot. Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, to let him know the child's importance. To let him understand that the bond he felt was not just fleeting, but the court, Leora, the prophecy, everything demanded secrecy. You protect the kingdom, Your Majesty, she whispered. I will protect what is hidden. That is enough. He sighed, stepping closer, the moonlight casting shadows across his features. It is never enough when the heart is involved, he murmured. Then, with a quick glance around, to ensure they were alone, he added, I feel torn between duty and desire, between what is right and what calls to me in the quiet hours. Celine's breath caught. She had longed to hear words like these from him, even if they were veiled in restraint. And yet, you continue, she said softly. Because duty demands it? Because I must, he replied. But it does not stop the heart from noticing. They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words pressing between them. The child moved, as if sensing the tension, a small pulse of magic that lit the night air around Celine's belly. A faint glow shimmered, unnoticed by Alaric, but Celine felt it, and it reminded her why she could not allow herself to surrender to longing. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the palace gates. Celine's eyes widened, and Alaric immediately straightened, alert. The sound repeated urgent, frightened, echoing through the gardens. Without a word, Alaric moved toward the gates, Selene following as quickly as she dared. There, a group of palace guards stood with their weapons drawn, surrounding a cloaked figure. The figure dropped to their knees, revealing a young messenger, breathless and pale. Your Majesty, the messenger gasped. The northern forests. There are shadows moving, creatures attacking travelers. They speak of a child, of the heir. Celine's heart froze. The prophecy had warned of danger, and now the first signs had arrived. The child within her stirred with an urgent pulse, as if aware of the threat. She pressed a hand to her belly instinctively, a protective gesture more powerful than any armor. Alaric's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. Shadows in the north, he said, his voice low and controlled. This is no ordinary threat. We must act carefully. Stay close. I cannot risk harm coming to you or to anything you carry. She nodded, feeling both fear and the stirrings of courage. I will stay, she said, though her mind raced with the weight of the secret she bore. The next days were tense. Celine moved through the palace with careful precision, avoiding suspicion while preparing for the coming threat. She watched Leora, radiant in her role as Luna, unaware of the danger that circled closer with every passing hour. Alaric met her in secret when he could, their moments brief but laden with meaning. The air between them was thick with longing, unspoken words, and the shared weight of impending danger. One night, as the moon reached its highest point, Selene ventured into the palace library, seeking ancient texts that might give insight into the shadows threatening the air. The child's magic pulsed faintly, guiding her fingers to a particular tome, bound in silver and marked with the sigil of the old kings. Opening the book, Selene found passages that chilled her. When the hidden air is threatened, the shadows will rise, and only the bond of courage and love shall shield the light of destiny. Betrayal may come from the closest hearts, and the path will test the strength of all who guard the child. Her heart raced. Betrayal? Was it Leora? Was it someone she could not yet trust? The prophecy was clear. The child's survival would not be easy, and danger could arise from the most unexpected places. A sudden noise startled her. She turned to see Alaric standing in the doorway, his expression tense. "You should not be alone with such knowledge," he said softly. "Even the book warns of betrayal. You must be careful whom you trust." Celine nodded, closing the tome gently. "I know," she said, "and I will be careful. But knowledge alone cannot protect us. Courage must guide us, and—" Alaric stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her face. "And yet, it is dangerous," he murmured. "The heart can betray even the wisest." She looked down, feeling the truth of his words deep in her chest. She had already been betrayed by circumstance, by duty, by the choices of others. Yet she could not deny the bond she felt with Alaric, even if it could never be spoken aloud. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the window, quick and silent. Both of them froze, alert. The garden outside was still, yet Celine felt the pulse of dark magic, faint but undeniable. The child within her stirred violently, a tiny surge of power that lit the room with faint silver sparks. Alaric moved instinctively, drawing himself into a protective stance. "They are coming," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "The shadows. They know." Celine swallowed hard, her hand on her belly. The prophecy was no longer distant. The danger was real, immediate. And she realized that from this moment on, nothing would be the same. Every glance, every secret, every heartbeat carried more weight than ever before. They stood together in the moonlit library, two hearts bound by circumstance, by unspoken longing, and by the shared duty to protect what no one else yet knew. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the first hints of a storm that would change their lives forever. Celine's thoughts returned to the prophecy, to the child, to the kingdom that rested on the delicate balance of light and shadow. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the tiny, urgent movements of the future itself. "We will endure," she whispered. "No matter the shadows, no matter the storm, we will endure." Alaric nodded, though he did not take her hand. "We must," he said quietly. "For them, for all of Nythera." And in the quiet, as the moonlight bathed them both, Celine realized that the true test had only just begun. The shadows were gathering, the prophecy was stirring, and the bonds of the heart, fragile and forbidden, would be tested in ways they could scarcely imagine. The storm was coming, and there was no place to hide. The night was thick with mist, curling around the palace towers like ghostly fingers. Celine could feel it in her bones, the tension of the coming storm, the pull of the prophecy, the heartbeat of the child she carried. Every step she took through the corridors was cautious, measured, aware of unseen eyes watching her. The court slept, unaware of the danger that had quietly crept closer. Celine's labor began as the moon climbed high, silver and commanding in the sky. Pain surged through her, sharp and relentless, and she pressed a trembling hand to the smooth marble of the corridor wall. She had hoped to bear the child in the sanctuary of her chambers, but fate had other plans. Alaric appeared at her side almost instantly, his expression tight with concern. "Celine," he whispered, guiding her gently toward a quieter wing of the palace. "We must move carefully. The shadows, they will not wait." Celine nodded, biting her lip to hold back a cry. The child's magic pulsed with the intensity of the moonlight itself, illuminating the walls with faint silver sparks. It was as if the very palace recognized the heir's importance, responding to the life that would save the kingdom. Together, they reached a secluded chamber at the edge of the palace, far from the bustling corridors. There, with Alaric's steady presence and his whispered reassurances, Celine gave birth to a child wrapped in the glow of moonlight. The moment the child's eyes opened, Celine felt a surge of relief and awe. This was no ordinary infant. The aura of power, gentle but undeniable, shimmered around them, a soft silver light that filled the chamber. Alaric looked at the child in astonishment, awe mixing with fear. "The prophecy," he murmured. "It is true." Celine, exhausted but radiant in her resolve, cradled the heir. "Yes," she whispered. "They are here, and we must protect them, whatever it takes." The first threat came swiftly. From the shadowed corridors outside, the faintest movements could be seen. Dark shapes, silent and menacing, slipping through the mist like smoke. The shadows had come for the heir. Alaric moved instinctively, drawing a small dagger that shimmered with runes of protective magic. Celine, holding the child, felt the power within them respond. A protective pulse that rippled through the room. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if sensing the magic they sought to snuff out. "You must stay behind me," Alaric instructed, his voice firm. "I will not let them touch you or the child." Celine nodded, her own magic stirring faintly in response to the heir's energy. She could feel the bond forming not just between herself and the child, but with Alaric as well. In the quiet intensity of the moonlit chamber, they became a small but unyielding force against the approaching darkness. The shadows moved closer, slipping through cracks in the walls, through hidden passages. Alaric's dagger flared with silver light, cutting through the darkness. Each strike of magic and steel seemed to push the shadows back, yet they were relentless. Celine whispered encouragement to the child, feeling tiny sparks of energy leap from them, weaving a protective barrier around the chamber. One shadow, larger and more aggressive than the others, lunged toward the child. Celine's heart raced as instinct took over. She reached forward, her hands glowing faintly, and a wave of protective energy surged outward, forcing the shadow back. The magic was raw and untrained, but powerful, guided by the instinct to protect. Alaric watched in awe. "They are strong," he said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Stronger than I imagined. Even at this age." Celine's eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. The child was the kingdom's hope, but they were also a bond that united them all. Alaric, Celine, and even, in time, the fractured loyalty of Leora. But that time was not now. Now, they had to survive the immediate threat. The shadows retreated only slightly, regrouping in the hall outside. Alaric looked to Celine. "We must leave," he said. "The palace cannot hold them. We must take the child to safety." Celine nodded, gathering the child in her arms. The glow from the heir's aura shimmered across her face, illuminating the determination in her eyes. "Where will we go?" she asked. "There is a hidden sanctuary," Alaric replied. "Ancient, protected by magic older than the palace itself. If we can reach it, the child will be safe, and we may have time to prepare." They moved swiftly through secret passages, Alaric leading the way, his dagger flaring with each encounter, Celine protecting the child with her growing, instinctive magic. The halls seemed endless, twisting like a labyrinth, and the shadows pursued relentlessly. But each time they struck, the child's magic pulsed, a shield of silver light that allowed them to pass. Finally, they emerged into the forest beyond the palace walls. The mist clung to the trees like breath, and the night hummed with unseen danger. Yet the forest also offered cover, and Celine felt a cautious relief. "We are not safe yet," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "But we have a chance." Alaric nodded, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "We will reach the sanctuary. We must. For them, for the kingdom, for all of Nythera." The journey through the forest was treacherous. Roots and rocks caught at their feet, shadows moved like living things among the trees, and strange, whispered voices seemed to call to them from the darkness. But the child's aura guided them, faint glimmers of silver lighting the path, revealing safe steps among the dangers. As dawn began to break, though dimly under the ever-present twilight, they reached the edge of the sanctuary, a hidden valley, surrounded by cliffs and veiled in protective enchantments. Ancient runes glowed faintly along the stones, welcoming them and recognizing the heir's power. Celine's heart lifted with relief, and Alaric allowed himself a rare smile, though it was tempered by the knowledge that danger was far from over. Inside the sanctuary, they were safe for now. Celine laid the child in a small bed woven from silver threads, its glow mingling with the soft moonlight that filtered through the enchanted canopy. The child slept, their tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm, the aura around them pulsing gently. Alaric stood beside Celine, his expression a mixture of awe, concern, and something softer, something he could not name. "They are remarkable," he said quietly. "Even I did not imagine." Celine looked up at him, exhausted but resolute. "They are the hope of Nythera," she said, "and we must protect them, no matter the cost." Alaric nodded. "We will. Together. See. Trom? Trom?" For a moment, they simply stood there. The weight of what had just happened settling over them. They had survived the first attack, but the shadows would not rest. The prophecy was still unfolding, and the child's power would soon attract forces beyond their understanding. Outside, the wind whispered through the cliffs, carrying a sense of both warning and promise. Celine pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the faint pulse of the child's magic. She knew the path ahead would be dangerous, filled with tests of courage, loyalty, and love. But she also knew they would endure. Alaric's voice broke the silence. "We must prepare," he said. "The kingdom must know. In time. But first, we must survive. We must keep them safe." Celine nodded, determination hardening within her. "We will," she said. "No matter what comes, we will protect the child." And in the quiet sanctuary, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight and magic, Celine realized something profound. This child was not just a symbol of hope, but a bond that could heal the fractures of the past, unite hearts divided by duty and desire, and challenge the shadows that sought to destroy them all. The storm was far from over. The shadows still lingered, plotting, waiting. But for the first time, Celine felt a spark of hope, a belief that they could survive, that the prophecy could be fulfilled, and that the bonds of love and courage could withstand even the darkest night. And somewhere in the forest beyond the sanctuary, eyes glimmered in the darkness, watching, waiting, knowing that the next battle had only just begun. The hidden sanctuary breathed with quiet power. Moonlight filtered through enchanted leaves, casting silver patterns across the ground. Celine held the child close, their aura pulsing softly, the magic of the air weaving through the air like a living heartbeat. Alaric stood beside her, his eyes never leaving the small figure in her arms, his presence steady, strong, and protective. The peace, however, was fragile. Beyond the cliffs and enchanted barriers, the shadows still stirred. Celine knew the final confrontation was inevitable. The child's power was awakening fully, and with it, the forces of darkness that sought to destroy what the prophecy promised. "We cannot wait," Alaric said quietly, his voice firm. "The shadows will not rest, and neither can we. Celine, we must prepare to face them." Celine nodded, determination hardening in her chest. "I will not let them take the child, no matter what." Her hand pressed to her belly instinctively, feeling the pulse of life and magic intertwined. "We have the power of the prophecy on our side." For hours, they prepared. Alaric forged weapons imbued with protective runes, while Celine focused on the child's aura, guiding the magic that began to rise like a tide around them. The air shimmered with energy, and even the sanctuary seemed to recognize the importance of what had come to life within its bounds. Night deepened, thick and almost alive with tension. Then, as if called by fate itself, the shadows attacked. They emerged from the mist in the valley, swirling like dark smoke, their eyes glowing faintly red, their forms shifting and unnatural. Celine stepped forward, the child in her arms, feeling the power within her surge in response. "Stay close to me," Alaric said, positioning himself between her and the approaching darkness. "We fight together." Celine's heart pounded. She had feared this moment, but she also felt an unyielding strength, born of love and necessity. She whispered softly to the child, their tiny aura responding instantly, flaring with silver light. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing as if they could feel the power they sought to destroy. Alaric struck first, his dagger cutting through the thickest of shadows, runes flaring with a brilliance that lit the night. Celine followed, directing the child's magic in pulses of protective energy that wrapped around them both, a shield strong enough to hold the encroaching darkness at bay. The shadows were relentless. One larger form, darker and more threatening than the rest, lunged toward Celine. The child stirred violently, sending a surge of light outward, scattering the shadow like dust in the wind. Celine gasped, clutching the air closer, realizing that their power was already shaping the outcome of the battle. Alaric's voice was firm, commanding, "Do not falter. Stand together." Celine met his eyes, feeling the unspoken bond between them. Trust, longing, courage, and love woven together in a moment of pure necessity. With a steadying breath, she focused on the child, letting their power radiate outward, weaving it into protective waves that pushed the shadows back further. The larger shadow hesitated, then shifted, almost as if it recognized the air's importance. The smaller shadows faltered, and in that moment, Celine realized the prophecy was being fulfilled. The air was not merely a child to protect, they were a force of light strong enough to repel the darkness itself. Alaric and Celine moved as one, striking and protecting, guiding the child's power with their combined will. The air pulsed with magic, the shadows screeched and writhed. And finally, with a surge of silver light, they dissipated into the mist. The valley was quiet once more. Celine sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated, holding the child close. Their tiny hand rested against her chest, and the glow of their aura softened, a gentle reminder of the life and power they carried. Alaric knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder, his gaze filled with awe and something more, something unspoken, yet deeply felt. "They are extraordinary," he whispered, his voice low and reverent. "Even the prophecy did not prepare me for this." Celine smiled faintly, brushing her hair back from her face. "The prophecy was only a guide," she said softly. "The child, they are more than words on a page. They are hope, Alaric, for the kingdom, and perhaps for us all." He reached forward, gently taking her hand in his. "For us?" he asked, his voice careful but filled with meaning. "Even after everything?" Celine met his gaze, the tension of longing and unspoken love between them, finally finding a fragile bridge. "Even after everything," she said quietly, "we protect them together. And perhaps, in time, we can heal what was broken between us." Alaric nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "Then we will face what comes next. Together." The first rays of faint light in the eternal twilight broke through the mist, illuminating the sanctuary in a silver glow that reflected from the child's aura. It was a moment of pure magic, quiet and beautiful, a promise of hope in a world that had seen so much shadow. Celine rested, feeling the child's heartbeat against hers, a rhythm that seemed to sync with her own. "You are the light," she whispered, and we will not let anyone extinguish it. Alaric's hand tightened around hers. And neither will I, he said firmly. No darkness, no shadow, no threat can take what we protect. Days passed in the sanctuary. Alaric and Selene trained the child's emerging magic, careful and watchful, while ensuring the hidden valley remained a secret. Leora, unaware of the full truth, continued her role as Luna, her presence distant but constant, a reminder of duty and sacrifice. Selene felt the tension of their family bonds shift slowly, as if the truth of the heir's importance could not remain hidden forever. Yet the shadows had been defeated, for now, and the child's power grew stronger each day. They were no longer merely a hidden heir. They were the symbol of hope that Nythera had longed for, the living promise that the kingdom could endure, even in the darkest times. One evening, under the pale silver moon, Selene watched Alaric gently guide the child's magic in small, playful bursts. The heir laughed, a tiny sound that resonated with the purity of life itself. Alaric's eyes met hers, soft and filled with unspoken words. They are incredible, he said, voice almost reverent. And so are you, Selene. You have protected them, guided them, and endured so much. Selene felt warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and a long-suppressed joy. I only did what I had to, she said softly. For them, for the kingdom. Alaric stepped closer, lowering his voice. Selene's breath caught. The world had been dark, filled with secrets and shadows. But now, in this quiet, moonlit sanctuary, there was possibility. For us, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. The child's tiny hand reached for Alaric, the glow of their magic pulsing brighter. Selene watched them, knowing that the prophecy had been fulfilled not just in survival, but in the forging of bonds stronger than duty, fear, or shadow. Outside, the first true light of day touched the cliffs of Nythera. The shadows had retreated, the kingdom was safe, and the heir's presence was a beacon that would guide them through whatever trials awaited. Selene pressed a hand to the child, feeling the magic pulse, the life within them, and the promise of a future she had once only dared to dream of. Alaric knelt beside her, his hand brushing hers over the child. Nythera will know hope again, he said softly, and it begins with them, and with us. Selene nodded, feeling the weight of the prophecy, the battles, the love, and the future. Yes, she said, it begins now. And in the stillness of the hidden sanctuary, beneath the silver light of the eternal moon, Selene, Alaric, and the child stood together united, unbroken, and ready to face whatever came next. The shadows had been defeated, but the bonds forged in the crucible of danger and love would endure forever. The prophecy had been fulfilled, and a new chapter for Nythera had begun.